Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. As we're set to deliberate the latest developments throughout the region, with focus, of course, on the state of Israel, it's important to remember that today we mark 571 days since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip had launched a devastating onslaught on southern Israel, murdering some 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping some 250 people. 59 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. In today's discussion, we have with us, all the way from Central Israel, is Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence of Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. And with me here in the studio, we have both Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish, formerly the commander of the Israeli Air Force
Air Defense,
currently the commander of the Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's a pleasure to have you with us here. And of course, last but not least, TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, 59 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. This evening, we will mark the eve of Remembrance Day here in the State of Israel, of course, with countless additional lives lost during the preceding year. Too many in any event, but nonetheless, again, 24 of the hostages are believed still to be alive, and there doesn't seem to be yet light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to their release.
Indeed, as we are speaking, the solemn or most solemn 2 days in the Israeli calendar have already begun. Tonight and tomorrow, the Remembrance Day, and then the Day of Independence. And the most remarkable and common theme in what you hear from all of the military officers and security chiefs who are conducting events at military units, cemeteries, gatherings of security personnel. For instance, the Shabak chief Ronen Bar has last night announced that he will be resigning on June 15th. This was an occasion to highlight this common theme that we must get the hostages back, that this is a top priority for the uniformed services as well as the civilian, Shabak, Mossad, also the police. They are all united. This is not a political statement. This is a mission statement.
And it's one of the top priorities, of course, as was set by the Security Cabinet here in Jerusalem, one of the three objectives of the war from the get-go. Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
Yes, but when the Chief of the General Staff and the personnel, manpower chief for the IDF and others speak, they do not mention, they do not deny, but they do not mention the other top priority mission of getting a clear victory over Hamas. It is there, but on the occasion of Remembrance Day and the Day of Independence, they all highlight the solemn duty of the IDF and the other services to get the hostages back because of the value of solidarity, of the buddy system of the Israeli Defense Forces, because several, you said 24, maybe there are only 21, but whatever the number is, several of these hostages are soldiers who were taken captive while fighting for Israel. And the bodies do not leave anyone behind.
Absolutely. This is a fundamental prerequisite for any military to thrive during times of war, let alone Israel, that has faced so many hardships over the course of so many years. But General Gavish, it goes without saying that the fighting in the Gaza Strip is intensifying, not in the levels that we saw prior to March 2nd, when there was or the last cessation of hostilities. But nonetheless, we are seeing a scenario in which the efforts to apply additional pressure on the Islamist Hamas is in the process of being executed.
Exactly, you're right, Jonathan, and this is what the IDF spoke about, and also the government idea was that we would be inside Gaza, but in a certain mode which is not yet the fully scale war against the Hamas, allowing the Hamas to understand from the one hand that Israel is serious. If he won't be willing to negotiate, and we're talking about negotiation, of course, what Israel is expecting to achieve from this negotiation is first to get the hostages back, then the Hamas won't be a ruler, the demilitarizing of the Gaza Strip and the leader of the Hamas out of Gaza. This is what Israel is expecting out of these negotiations. But the plan is to press the Hamas to a point that they would understand that if he would continue with his refusal to negotiate with Israel, he would have what to lose. And the IDF is preparing himself for the next stage. We all hope that we won't get to the next stage, because we understand that if we would go to a full-scale war, we would be in a point that probably it would harm our the ones that are in captive, and we just talked about it. This is really one of the first values when we and moral obligation of the IDF and Israel as a nation. We all have to remember that it was us who failed, the IDF, the Israeli government, to defend those people during the 7th of October. So it is our obligation to bring them back. So yes, the plan is there. As much as I heard is that there is a very high-level negotiation convoy which is now in Egypt. We also see a shift between Qatar to Egypt, which I think it is playing for the benefit of Israel and for the negotiation. So let's see. We really hope that we all hope that it would happen during this Independence Day. We hope that it would happen in a few weeks from now.
Well, taking into account that the last Qatari proposal, which it agreed to with Hamas, was a 5-year cessation of hostilities in exchange for all hostages, in addition to thousands of Palestinian terror operatives who were convicted and incarcerated in Israeli jails released, including many of them, hundreds of them, with blood on their hands, something that Israel, of course, cannot agree to, since this would, in practical terms, mean that Hamas would survive the atrocities that it committed by maintaining its both governing and military capabilities and rearm for another round of conflict in the future. But we'll have to wait and see how the Egyptians are going to maneuver in this very delicate issue. And it seems like, according to the latest information coming out of Cairo, that there is some progress being made. So it's not that it's stagnant, but nonetheless, there are different challenges that are being addressed in full force. And we also need to take into consideration that there is also growing pressures on Israel, on the leadership here in Jerusalem, not only from Eastern countries and totalitarian regimes in the region, but also from the United States. President Donald Trump seeing the plight of the Palestinian population, the non-combatant population, and saying that he is applying pressure on Netanyahu to resolve the matter. Of course, there is the Fourth Geneva Convention per Article 23, allowing Israel not to provide humanitarian aid so long as it goes into the hands of the Islamist Hamas. But nonetheless, Israel at the same time is also providing, still to date, since the previous cessation of hostilities, drinking water. From the latest report produced by the Coordinator for Government Activities in the Territories, it did mention that it employed Palestinian residents in order to fix some of the pipelines that entered into the Gaza Strip in order to ensure that drinking water is provided to the population of Gaza. And that also speaks volume into the moral base to which Israel is trying to conduct its affairs. But nonetheless, General Sofrian, when we're talking about the complexities currently dealing with Hamas, it doesn't stay only in the Gaza Strip. It is also, if we're talking about Judea and Samaria, we're talking about Lebanon, we're talking about Syria. All those areas do have plenty of involvement from the Islamist Hamas, and therefore, what is currently the ongoing modus operandi for Israel's defense and intelligence establishments to confront Hamas in every of those sectors?
I think that the first problem is, except from Gaza Strip, of course, is in Lebanon, because Hamas in Lebanon still exists. It is still maintaining power, and is still maintaining the links with Hezbollah. And even though Hezbollah is weakened and Hezbollah doesn't really play now a major role inside the Lebanese politics, but nevertheless they support Hamas. And Israel is trying to hit Hamas activists, senior ones, those who plan and those who try to execute and to implement terror attacks inside Israel. And as long as the Palestinians are in the refugee camps, the Hamas is there, they got control on the refugee camps a long time ago, and they control it, and now they maintain power right there, weapon systems as well, and they can be able to attack Israel from there if the Lebanese armed forces will not deny it, or if Hezbollah will not deny it, or tell them not to interfere. That's part one. The second one, of course, is Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria stand for itself, even though these are Palestinians, just like in Gaza Strip. Nevertheless, Judea and Samaria are inspired by Iran, totally, and supported by the Iranians, and the Iranians are delivering weapon systems, trying to smuggle weapon systems via Jordan and other places as well, and to arm the groups inside Judea and Samaria. And we see that for the last 7 or 8 months, we are fighting in Judea and Samaria, day by day, area by area, trying to unroot the people of the mainly Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad cells that are inside the refugee camps, and not only, in the villages as well. And this is an ongoing war, and as long as it is supported by the Iranians, who are trying, by the way, to destabilize the Jordanian regime and to take advantage of that, and from there to deliver weapon system to Hamas and to Palestinian Islamic Jihad inside Judea and Samaria. This is an ongoing active arena that will demand from the IDF to keep on fighting and to keep on unrooting these people and to deny their activities and to deny them from trying to attack or to carry out attacks inside Israel.
Thank you, General Sofrian. Mr. Oren, Lebanon is a portfolio that is also very challenging, to say the least. It demands vast reforms in order to root out deep corruption within the various institutions that control the Lebanese state, not to even discuss Hezbollah's involvement in that and the influence from the Islamic Republic of Iran. But what is currently being done from a American perspective, from a French perspective, as both those countries are heavily involved in dealing with the Lebanese question, and Israel maintains still 5 separate posts in order to ensure a buffer between Lebanese territory and the Israeli communities on the border.
Let me call your move and race. It is not only Lebanon with the posts inside its territory, but also Syria. And the Syrian leader, Ahmed Ashara, has been meeting with visiting American congressmen and is sending ministers to the United States. And in his talks with the Americans, he is trying to portray a new Syria and a new policy, even vis-a-vis Israel. The visitors and Ashara did not raise the issue of the Golan Heights. They only spoke about the Israeli presence in Syria now. And what he said was that he wants to have normal relations, he didn't specify, with Israel, and his condition is that Israel leave Syria. This would probably also applies to Lebanon. But let me share with you a short personal note. Exactly 50 years ago, on April 29th and 30th of 1975, I happened to be visiting Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for meetings with the 82nd Airborne Division and the Army Special Forces. This coincided with the fall of Saigon and the end of the Vietnam War, which was quite a defeat for the United States because Congress did not fund what the Americans promised South Vietnam. But if you look now forward 50 years ago, 50 years on, and even less than that, the American-Vietnamese relationship is fine. And this can happen with the Israeli-Saudi relationship if a solution is found for Gaza, including some horizon for the Palestinians in general, integrating Israel into the Middle East, and even relations with Syria and Lebanon. And by the way, why do the American administrations, all of them, never call on Iraq to normalize its relations with Israel? Iraq is the only Arab state which since 1948 has denied the existence of Israel. So perhaps this is some food for thought for our American friends.
Not the only. I think Yemen has also not really
Well,
eagerly sought Israel's acceptance. Kuwait at that.
Kuwait was not even then existent.
I'm saying since 48 doesn't matter in what
Yeah.
context, but despite things happening behind the scenes, there is still animosity in different public spheres and particularly
You
the
may
publics
keep
that
Yemen
we're
and
speaking
Kuwait,
about.
I'll take Iraq.
All right. Iraq, you mean?
Iraq.
Right. But with regard to your point about Syria, I mean, it is really great to hear Abu Muhammad al-Julani or Ahmad al-Sha'a, the way he calls himself today, speaking with American congressmen about normalization with Israel and joining potentially the Abraham Accords and selling them all kind of delusions at a time when we're talking here about a former member of Al-Qaeda who was not just a member, he was one of the leaders and the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who actively utilizes Al-Qaeda today in Syria, is actively persecuting minorities in Syria, and just a couple of months ago was talking about destroying the state of Israel.
So the proof of the hummus is in the eating.
Well, the proof is that just last night we saw HTS forces of Abu Muhammad al-Julani launching an attack into the Druze neighborhood of Jaramana with a number of casualties, including killed individuals. In this altercation, Israel had to launch number of aerial assets in order to deter, and the situation is very, very delicate.
Indeed.
And the chances of al-Julani normalizing relations with Israel are not very likely at this point in time, nor are the chances for the so-called Caesar Act to be lifted, so long as this terrorist continues to act in his true form.
But you know, Jonathan, at the end of the day, you make peace with your enemies. And at least if we're looking at it from the Israeli perspective, we prefer that the discussions would be with the United States and not with the other alternatives. So United States presence discussing with the al-Julani, I see it as a positive sign. And, United States have the tools to control what is happening in Syria if it would decide to. So in general, looking at the alternative, I see it as a positive sign that there are talks between the United States and Syria, and let's see where it is leading us. I fully agree with you that we have to be very cautious because we have to remember at the end of the day, who is this guy, what he did in the past, but let's give it a chance.
Not only what he did, but what he's doing.
What he's doing, yeah.
So let me ask you, General. So, for instance, the Kurdish leadership of Syria came out and stated that it is now in dialogue with the Damascus regime about a federalized constitution that would ultimately separate the different areas from the Damascus regime, but like in Iraq, will provide different entities within Syria that will operate separately from Damascus. Is that something that you believe would be acceptable in light of the Turkish angle to this question?
I think that if you look at Syria today, Syria is divided into four ethnic groups. The first one is the Alawites that are concentrated along the coastline from Tartus, Latakia, and all these areas. The second one is the Kurds that are concentrated on the northeast part of Syria and along the Turkish-Syrian border. The third one is the Druze on the southern part of Syria, and there are Jabal Druze and Sweda. And the rest of them are all over the country. Most of them are Sunnis, Muslim Sunnis. Now, I believe that this can be kind of a federation, just like Iraq. The fact that in Iraq the Kurds have their own autonomy, their own government, their own president, their own institutions, can be a model for the coming of the future of Syria. That means Syria will not be controlled anymore by a minority, just like the Alawites control it since 1970. And therefore, if you look at the model of Iraq, I believe it can be applied in Syria as well.
On that, General Gavish, since we are looking here, of course, the results, if we do go to a federal system, that will speak volumes on whether or not the jihadist aspirations have been put aside or not, since a true jihadist would never accept such terms and conditions. But if we're looking at the Syrian file, what is the main concern for Israel from a defensive perspective?
First of all, I fully agree with Dr. Sofran. I just made a professor.
He's also a professor.
So he's also a professor in the Reichman University. So,
right.
But I fully agree with Amnon, because this is really, if you're looking in Syria, and this is what would happen also with the Druze, by the way, then we will understand that we are and I concur with you. From the Israeli point of view, of course, we are expecting that this Syria area, let's still call it Syria, would be without weapons that could arm Israel. We're talking about missiles, and we're talking about an air force, and talking about air defense capabilities, which from the Israeli perspective, we have to remember that we are expecting to have our capabilities, or our, I would say, capability to deny Iran rearming the Hezbollah. This is the first, I would say, thing that we are looking at from the Israeli perspective. And of course, we wouldn't like any terrorist groups, whoever they are, close to the Israeli border in the Golan Heights. So from one hand, to stop the Iranians, from the other end, to make sure that we are secure in our border. This is the direct, I would say, interest of Israel. We don't want any involvement of any third country coming into Syria. This is also an interest of Israel. And by the way, for the Druze, we see them as a positive, I would say, organization within Syria. The relations with them are very important to Israel. They are in the south part of Syria. So I think that also this is a key point of the relations that we would keep with the Druze in the south part of Syria.
Community, of course. There are plenty of organizations within that community. Not all agree with one another, but nonetheless, this complex community is a very tranquil when we're talking about its aspirations to live in peace and security in the boundaries of its own government. But Mr. Oren, one of the points that Dr. Mike Duran from Hudson Institute always says is that Syria needs now to serve as a buffer between Turkey and Israel in light of, let's put it frankly, the animosity between Ankara and Jerusalem, and voiced aspirations by Ankara to potentially also conquer Jerusalem at some point in the future, voiced by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and something that Israel is taking literally and is very concerned about. The country that has been mediating between the two sides is no other than Azerbaijan, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to travel there later on Wednesday. What can you tell us about that?
So obviously, there was a secret or a covert channel between the two parties. One doesn't need another country's president. It's much like the Omanis only giving their auspices to the American-Iranian negotiations. It's not as if the Omani foreign minister is conveying messages. He's there, he's present, but the Azerbaijanis
Don't tell the Iranians.
Yes, no, they indirect. It's just a charade. Of course, the good officers of Azerbaijan are fine, but the model for a buffer state is Jordan between Iraq and Israel. And General Sofrin has been the intelligence officer for the Central Command facing Jordan and therefore Iraq. Israel has always said that should Iraqi forces enter Jordan, Israel would also do it in order to intercept and prevent a hostile force being on Israel's border. The same applies to Turkey vis-a-vis Israel in Syria.
General Sofrin, 20 seconds. What should we focus on in that context?
First of all, we have to see what kind of relation are developing or evolving between the Syria regime, meaning Ahmad Shara, and between the Turkish presence inside Syria. There's something that will not endanger Israel. And the second issue, to make sure that no armed presence is deployed south of Damascus until up to the area of Jabal Druze and Sweda.
Absolutely. Well, General Amnon Sofrin, General Doron Gavish, and Mr. Amir Oren, thank you so very much for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.